Okay, we'll call to order the July 26, 2023 Planning and Zoning Board meeting. If you're here for anything else, you're in the wrong place. Sure. And with that, we'll have roll call.
Carla Coleman.
Here.
Tundra King.
Here.
Richard Klasowitz.
Here.
Joan Kovac.
Here.
Derek Lewis.
Here.
Darlene Smith.
Here.
And Fred Stacer.
Here, I believe you left Tundra. Did he call you? Yes. Oh, I'm sorry. I was looking out of order then. Okay, great. So we have a quorum. Everybody's here tonight with the original band. Okay. And with that, we'll have our traditional 30-second moment of silence, please. If you would just meditate for the next 30 seconds, please. Thank you. Okay, thank you very much. And with that, next item on our agenda is the approval of the minutes of the June 28th. The chair will entertain a motion on that.
Move they be approved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Do we have any corrections or adjustments to the? Any questions on the motion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, it's unanimous. Next item on the agenda, all the individuals who will be speaking tonight, if at this time, if you would stand and be sworn in, Secretary will swear you all in at one time. Thank you.
Do you swear or affirm that the evidence you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And with that, first item of business, the Covenant Gardens Flex application was withdrawn permanently. Is that correct? It's going to come back as something different. Okay. So with that, do we need a motion to withdraw it or just leave it? Okay, so it's withdrawn. Okay, second item on the agenda is Pompano City Square rezoning. And that has the chair will entertain a motion to postpone that item to the August meeting. We had the applicant send in a letter.
Mr. Chair, I make a motion that we postpone it to the August meeting.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to postpone item number 2. Any questions on the motion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, it's unanimous. Item number 3, Pompano Beach City Center PCD amendment, covered by the same letter. Chair will entertain a motion to postpone that item as well.
Chair,
Yes.
make a motion that we postpone LN 355.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to postpone item number 3 to the August meeting. Any questions on the motion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Thank you very much. Item number 4, Pompano Beach City Center residential site plan. Under the same letter, it was requested that this be postponed as well to the August meeting. Chair will entertain a motion on item 4.
I have a motion. Move that we postpone LN 220 to the August meeting.
Have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Motion and a second to postpone item number 2. Any questions on the motion? Hearing none. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay. It's unanimous. The rest of the meeting not going to go this fast, folks. Sorry. I was on a roll, wasn't I? Okay. Here we go. Item number 5. 1207 East Atlantic Boulevard. It's a plat request. P&Z 23-14503 at the same address, 1207 East Atlantic Boulevard. This is Barshevsky.
Evening, Chair, Planning Board members. This, for the record, my name is Maggie Barshevsky. So this is a proposed plat for a property approximately 1.047 acres in size located at the northwest corner of Atlantic Boulevard and Northeast 13th Avenue, and has an address of 1207 East Atlantic Boulevard. The agent is Andrea Harper of Keith Incorporated, and she is representing the owner of the property, which is 1207 East Atlantic LLC, CO Atex Group. And the subject property consists of one parcel, which is the former site of the county library. The plat consists of two parcels labeled Parcel A for the developable property and Parcel B for a small right-of-way dedication parcel. The plat restricts the property to 41 mid-rise units, 6 townhouse units, and 5,200 square feet of commercial space. The plat shows 2 access points. One is located on East 13th Avenue, and the other is on Northeast 1st Street. A conceptual site plan has been provided for this plat submittal. The subject property has a land use designation of ETOC, East Transit Oriented Corridor, and the zoning is TO-EOD, which is Transit Oriented East Overlay District. The plat was reviewed by the DRC meeting at the DRC meeting held on July 19th, 2023, and found to be in compliance with the city's land development regulations. All comments from the DRC meeting have been addressed. The plat reflects all County Development Review Report recommendations. However, these County DRR recommendations required that the plat include 2 dimensions that are in conflict with the approved site plan, as well as being in conflict with the intent of the TO-EOD development regulations. These dimensions include a corner chord based on a 30-foot radius on the plat's southeast corner, and an indentation for a bus shelter on the Atlantic Boulevard frontage. So the applicant has submitted an objection to these 2 requirements. Let's see. And the Development Services staff supports the objection. 2 conditions have been suggested to amend the plat prior to the City Commission review if the objections are upheld. So the review standards for the plat found on Article 5, Part 7 of the Code have been met. Therefore, staff recommends approval of this plat with 4 conditions that must be completed prior to the placement on the City Commission. The 4 conditions are: 1, the plat cover sheet page must be signed and sealed by the surveyor and signed by all owners. Number 2, the elimination of the 30-foot radius corner cord from the corner of the East Atlantic Boulevard and Northeast 13th Avenue should be eliminated. The elimination of the indentation along the property's southern frontage line, that is the indentation to accommodate the bus shelter, and upon the elimination of the corner cord shift, the location of the current bus shelter should be where the bus shelter would be reflected. That concludes my presentation. Oh, I would also like to bring up that there was a slight problem with the plats that you might have seen. So to clear up any confusion, I want to make sure that you understand the plat sheet 3 that you are approving. Bear with me just a second. Okay. So this was shown to you. It's just that there was another one that was also shown to you, that was an older one. This was the second one that was uploaded, and the first one was not removed. I apologize. So just to clear up any confusion, this is the one, and you will see the indentation along Atlantic for that bus shelter, and also the diagonal line on the southeastern corner of the plat, where they wanted the corner cord that actually does not need to be there. So we are recommending that those be removed.
Okay.
I'm happy to answer any questions, and the applicant is here also.
Okay, anybody have any questions? Go ahead, Mrs. Coleman.
I know that we're here for plating, but I have just a clarification on the site plan that was included in this. Site plan that was included in the packet. It's my understanding that the apartments are on the Atlantic Boulevard side. The townhomes are facing the neighborhood.
So I will let the applicant answer.
You want to ask, okay, I'll hold the
You'll
question.
hold that question?
No.
Okay. Any other questions of staff before we move to the applicant?
And I do.
Yes, Mrs. Kovac, go ahead.
So what are the requirements when the county's DRI comes down with two requirements? Are we bound by that, or we just,
No, so plats are really regulated by the county, and they simply require the city to kind of review it to give like a no objection or whatever. So we have an objection because our standards don't allow what the DRR report was recommending. There is one staff person on the county that was looking to have the corner cord and the bus indentation. If the corner cord issue is resolved, there is no need to change the current location of that bus shelter that is there now. So since they were requiring that corner cord, they said, all right, well, let's move the current bus shelter a little bit to the west, which actually would really ruin the front of this building. And this has already gone through site plan and the review for architecture, so it would be a problem should this be retained the way that staff person on the county was requiring. So they are going to have to review this, and hopefully they will allow us to continue to or allow this indentation to be removed, and everybody, this bus station will be able to stay where it is currently.
so we're not mandated to comply with the county's requirements?
No, this will ultimately be going to the county. So we're just asking that, or we're showing our support for the objection that the applicant has provided. And hopefully that will work its way through, and it has to be resolved prior to our going to the city commission, because they submit a Mylar that has to be signed by Fred and our mayor. So all of it will be resolved
Okay,
prior to city commission.
thank you.
And I don't think they also wouldn't be in compliance with the approved site plan at that point,
Right.
if they were required to do this cord. So there's a lot of things they would have to come back to us.
They have to come back.
Start this process over. Anyway, anybody else before we go to the applicant? Okay. Mr. Applicant, even though you're impersonating Andrea Harper tonight, you can go ahead. I'll let you speak anyway.
Yes, I am. All right.
Okay.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the Planning and Zoning Board. My name is Mike Vondermeulen with Keith. Our address is 301 East Atlantic Boulevard in Pompano Beach, and I have been sworn. To answer your question, Ms. Coleman, the site plan was actually approved by the Planning and Zoning Board last month.
That's right.
And I do believe, I think in the apartments or condominiums or whatever they are above the second floor. I believe there's ground floor commercial use facing Atlantic Boulevard. And then you are correct, there are townhouse units or walk-ups lining the other two streets. Yes.
I just wanted to make sure I was remembering the right one.
And that is correct.
Thank you.
Yeah, in reference to what Maggie is trying to explain, there is a process, and since the planning process is almost a year, sometimes even longer process, we try to condense some of this, and so we're trying to run two different processes together, both the review by the Planning and Zoning Board and what we call a letter of objection through the county staff. And that is the process that we're going through. Because these requirements from Broward County do not comply with the roadway standards that the city has adopted, there is a negotiation that needs to go back and forth. That process is actually called the letter of objection. They have a certain number of days to reply, and then you can negotiate. And hopefully we'll work out everything prior to that all coming to City Commission. If there are other issues, we may have to come back, or the site plan may have to come back. So there's a lot of negotiation that still needs to go out, but it should all be finalized by the time it gets to the City Commission. We believe we will prevail. There was a similar instance for the Atlantic One property. It also needed to be platted. They went through the objection process and were successful. I believe it's the same developer on this project. So, we're going to use those same reasonings and arguments in our letter of objection to the county.
Okay. But anybody else? Okay, seeing none, anybody in the audience want to speak on this item? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. If there aren't any last-minute questions, the chair will entertain a motion on item number 5.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to
Yes.
make a motion.
Mrs. Coleman, go ahead.
That the board finds that competent and substantial evidence has been presented satisfying the review standards for this plat application, and therefore I move approval of the item with the 4 conditions outlined in the staff report.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any questions on the motion? Seeing none, call the roll on item number 5, please.
Carla Coleman,
Yes.
Richard Clausewitz,
Yes.
Tundra King,
Yes.
Joan Kovac,
Yes.
Derek Lewis,
Yes.
Darlene Smith,
Yes.
Fred Stacer.
Yes, thank you very much. Item number 6. 2050 Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard. It's a plat, P&Z 22-1440414 on 2050 Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard. Mrs. Barshevsky, you're up.
Thank you, Chair. So for the record, my name is Maggie Barshevsky, and this is 2050 MLK plat. This is a proposed plat for a property approximately 3.787 acres in size, located at the southeast corner of Powerline Road and Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard. The agent is Keith Incorporated, is representing the owner of the property, which is Mary Jewel LLC and 1/4 Ham LLC. The subject property consists of one parcel that currently consists of a convenience store, which is to be demolished. The property will be platted as one parcel labeled Parcel A and has 2 access points on Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard. The plat restricts the property to 261 mid-rise units with a parking garage. A conceptual site plan has been provided along with the plat submittal. The subject property has a land use designation of commercial and the zoning is B3. The plat was reviewed by the DRC board held on November 16th, 2022. The plat was found to be in compliance with the city land development regulations. All comments from the DRC meeting have been addressed. Broward County Development Review, or DRR, recommendations have been addressed on the plat, with the exception of certain modifications related to the non-vehicular access line, or the NVAL, also for access and bus shelter sidewalk dedications. Broward County will make a determination regarding such modifications through their appeal process prior to the submittal of the City Commission. The review standards for the plat found in Article 5, Part 7 of the Code have been met. Therefore, staff recommends approval of this plat with one condition that must be completed prior to the placement on the City Commission, which is the plat cover sheet must be signed and sealed by the surveyor and signed by all owners. This concludes my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, anybody have any questions to staff before we go to the applicant? Seeing none? Counselor, I knew you didn't come here just to visit. I knew you were going to speak on something
I
tonight.
mean, just to look pretty, right?
that's
Good evening, Dwayne Dickerson, for the record, attorney for the applicant, offices at 14 Southeast 4th Street in Boca Raton. And Maggie gave a great report, so not much to add other than the process with the county is when you submit and they issue their development review report, you can do one of two things. You can issue a letter to proceed, or if there's something in there that needs to be amended or corrected, you have to do a letter of objection. So it sounds harsher than it is. I mean, nowadays, I don't have projects that we don't have to issue a letter of objection. There's something in the DRR that needs to be tweaked. So that's where we are. It's a very standard process, and I'll tell you, we've already had conversations with the county, and we're on the same page of the changes that we asked for in our letter of objection. We've made those amendments in our site plan and gotten approval from your fire department with respect to access and stuff like that. So we're in really good shape. We're comfortable with where we are, and if you recall with the site plan, you guys had some very specific requests. One, remove billboards, which is done. Two, reorient the parking garage, which was done. And three, add more parking, which was done. So when I see you with the site plan, hopefully you're very happy. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions that you have. Thank you.
I'm always happy, even if we turn you down.
No, I'm not happy then.
I didn't say you were happy. You asked me if I was happy. I'm sorry.
Both need to be, and
I'm happy.
more importantly, my client needs to be happy.
No, I'm with you on that, brother. Does anybody have any questions of the applicant before I fall off my chair here? Okay, anybody in the audience want to speak on this item? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. And with that, Chair will entertain a motion on item number 6.
Chairman,
Yes.
since the applicant has provided competent and substantial evidence to satisfy the review standards for plat approval, I move that we recommend approval of the plat subject to the one condition outlined by staff.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Anybody have any questions on the motion? Hearing none, call the roll on item number 6, please.
Joan Kovac,
Yes.
Derek Lewis,
Yes.
Tundra King,
Yes.
Richard Klasowitz,
Yes.
Darlene Smith,
Yes.
Carla Coleman,
Yes.
Fred Stacer.
Yes. Okay, good luck. All right, moving along. Item number 7, 1801 North Andrews, major site plan, P&Z 22-12, 4052. Address obviously is 1801 North Andrews Avenue. Mrs. Lance, you're up. Good to see you tonight.
Thank you for such a warm welcome. All right, good evening, Mr. Chair and board members. I am Helena Lahans, planner with Development Services. This agenda item is for 1801 North Andrews Avenue in District 4. Staff is recommending approval with conditions for this major site plan. Here is the location map of the site. It is just west of Copans Road and at the intersection of Northwest 18th Street and Northwest Andrews Avenue. Here is the aerial map. The site is currently zoned general industrial with a future land use category of industrial. The site is currently developed with a 114,340 square feet, two-story industrial building. The applicant is proposing to construct a new 124,071 square feet, one-story industrial building for warehousing and distribution for tenants. The total building's footprint for the proposed warehouse, aforementioned, is 124,071 square feet. It is 34% of the lot, which is 8.3 acres. The site was reviewed before the Development Review Committee on March 1st of 2023, April 19, and June 7th. The site will be providing a 20-foot perimeter landscaping strip along Northwest 18th Street and North Andrews Avenue, and 18 feet to the rear and 30 feet to the west, and I will show you on the site plan. There will be 126 parking spaces, 20 loading berths, and 27 truck parking spaces. The parking is currently based on the warehouse as the principal use, with the floor area of the office being less than 20% of the total floor gross area. Here are the existing conditions of the site. As you can see from Northwest Andrews, there's like a lot of parking, maybe few landscaping. So the site has a major facade improvement with landscaping, curbing, and I think stormwater as well. Here is the site plan. The majority of the parking, the truck court is to the rear, so it's not really fronting Northwest Andrews Ave or Northwest 18th Street. It's properly screened with all of the required landscaping, buffering, and a little bit more of what we require. Okay. The site is consistent with the surrounding areas. To the north is all industrial. It was a retention pond. To the south is office industrial park. And to the east is also a warehouse, and to the west is a warehouse. So it's pretty consistent and compliant with the area. So this is a list of the review standards that the project is subject to meet. Staff finds that there's competent substantial evidence in the record that development is consistent with and complies with the 12 site plans review standards as identified in the staff report, with the exception of staff recommended conditions of approval. Staff recommends approval of the major site plan subject to the following comments and conditions. Provide a revised landscape plan that demonstrates that the proposed trees do not encroach within the 15-foot radius of the light fixtures as required by code. And this concludes my presentation.
Okay, thank you very much. Questions before we go to the applicant? Mr. Applicant, would you like to speak? You're not under an alias like that other guy. Yeah. Bet you this is his real name.
Good evening, Chairman, members of the Planning Zone Board. My name is James Kahn with Keith & Associates, 301 East Atlantic Boulevard, and I have been sworn. Gave a great presentation, had all the facts there. Basically, taking an old, tired warehouse building that's been modified several times and putting a new state-of-the-art building there. Luckily, we already have a buffer out front. We're maintaining existing 20-foot buffer all the way around. We are concealing all the parking in the back, all the truck parking, and it is a warehouse building, so we've done the best to totally make it look very acceptable in the front. The Architectural Review Committee, love the presentation. It's I can get my renderings up here. I'll show you a little. But it's you've seen some of the other first industrial buildings. This is very similar in style.
Okay.
Bless you.
Let's give you just a brief, another location of the building. It's south of Copeland's Road on Andrews Avenue. This is the existing site. As you can see, it's already an existing building there. You can see how it's different buildings that have been put together there already. We're only enlarging the building slightly, but we're tearing down the existing building and putting a brand-new structure there. Skip the boring stuff, but you can see the building there with the landscaping 20 feet all the way around the building. All the parking is in the back with just employee parking in the front. Just give you an idea of the rendering. The typical first industrial buildings that you've seen before that are first-class buildings, they're all Silver LEED certified buildings. And that would be the back of the building. We have an architecturally all the way around the side of the building, so we have a very nice architectural building, and this will be an improvement to the industrial base of the city. Back to that. So we meet all the criteria, and we work with staff hard, and we appreciate all their efforts, and so we'll answer any questions you might have.
Your client's okay with the two conditions of staff?
Yes, we agree with all the conditions, yes.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I just
Yes.
have one question.
Yes, Ms.
Is
Coleman.
this a spec building, or do you have clients that are,
Right now,
Locate there.
there is a tenant in the building, and their lease isn't up yet, but no, they don't have a tenant at the moment.
okay, thank you.
Anybody else? Anybody in the audience want to speak on this? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing, and with that, unless there's any questions, the chair will entertain a motion on item number 7.
I have a motion.
Yes.
Move that the board find competent substantial evidence has been presented for the major site plan in LN 415 that satisfies the review criteria, and move approval of the item subject to the two conditions provided by staff.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second him.
We have a motion and a second. Any questions on the motion? Seeing none, call the roll on item number 7, please.
Derek Lewis,
Yes.
Joan Kovac,
Yes.
Tundra King,
Yes.
Richard Klosowitz,
Yes.
Darlene Smith,
Yes.
Carla Coleman,
Yes.
Fred Stacer.
Yes. Okay, good luck. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is item number 8, live industrial parcel, major site plan, P&Z 23-124013. Address is 777 Isle of Capri Circle. Mr. Keystro Mills.
To continue the shell game, my name is Daniel Keystro Mills, not with Max Weems.
No.
This is the live industrial property. So the project location is just south of Racetrack Road and east of Power Line. The proposed building is 1.5 million square feet. It's a warehouse distribution. The use. There's about 8 buildings that will be proposed as part of this site plan application with a height of about 45 feet. This project has gone through the Development Review Committee and Architectural Appearance Committee in June and July of this year. This is consistent with the land use plan amendment and planned commercial development, PCD, rezoning that is in place for this property. The review standards have been, are on the screen and have been included in your staff report with more detail of how the proposed project is in compliance with those review standards. So this is generally the site plan application. There are buildings back and forth mirroring with a truck court in between them, and there's 4 pairs of those. And this is generally, it's a very large site, and so this is generally on the west side of the property abutting the railroad. Department recommendations, there are 2 generally of them, and it's a few sub conditions. Generally, 1, prior to the issuance of a certificate of occupancy for development, the applicant shall to the 5 subconditions, and number 2, standard conditions of the approval and or specifications required prior to the building permit and zoning compliance permit. There are 5 of those as well. I'm happy to answer any questions that I can, but I believe that the applicant is much more familiar with this master plan and proposed site plan. So I'll be happy to turn it over to them to make their presentation, which will probably be in more detail.
Okay. Anybody have a question of staff before we get the applicant? Before the applicant starts, I just would like to put on the record that I've had conversations with the owners and owners rep, but nothing that was said at those at that meeting was discussion would preclude me from dealing with this strictly based on what is being presented tonight.
1 million square feet, 1.5 million square feet.
Uh-oh. They have computer failure?
While they're figuring out the technical
Oh,
difficulties here,
okay.
Debbie Orshevsky here on behalf of the applicant, attorney with offices at 515 East Las Olas Boulevard, Fort Lauderdale. With me this evening is Corey Long, who is tasked with building this incredible project and who I think you all have met numerous times now. We also have Scott Helms, who is an industrial development consultant working with the development team. The Keith team is here, and I hope they've found our presentation. Yeah? No? Okay, I'll keep talking. I can do this. And Ray Gomez, who's the project architect.
I think they're debating whose fault it is.
So I have this really pretty picture. I'm happy
Apparently, you should have brought 7 of them.
so we can start talking while they figure this out.
Upside down.
Do they have to shrink that for you or something? Is that what's? There's a lot of buttons. Well, apparently somebody else pushed some other buttons that didn't work, so I would be careful if I was without the owner's manual.
Ooh,
There
other
you
way.
go.
There we go.
No, go to.
Let me start with, we wanted to give a status report. So, and this is really quite awkward, I'm sorry. So starting here, we have Topgolf, which is under construction. That's this parcel here. The Urban Village, Shopping Village, which you also have approved, is in for construction permitting. We have the Casino Garage, which has been completed and is being occupied. It's really nice. I was there recently. The other casino expansion. The last site plan that you all approved is for the live venue, which is also in permitting shortly. So everything's moving along, and the first one that will be completed in this round will actually be Topgolf. They are slated to be done before the end of this year. So I think they're trying for the winter season, so on their way. Let me talk a bit about the residential. The first piece that will likely come in for the residential, this is in design development right now. And the lake, you got it? No. Oh, sorry. Take me out of here.
Oh, that.
Okay. Hi, this is really fun. So now, the real problem now is I can't point, I have to identify for you, so we'll do that. But as I was saying, pretty much almost everything on the west of all the non-residential west of the industrial parcel is either in for permitting or under construction. The residential next to that red parcel in the middle, which will be part of a mixed-use portion of that first residential, 300 and something units, that will be in. Again, it's in design development by Cordish, and they'll be proceeding with that. The lake, by the way, configuration now has been finalized and has been permitted. Not fully, but it's got the city blessing, I believe. I want it, the kind of orange-colored residential to the south side of the lake extending to Power Line, those will come in various chunks over the next couple of years. And the yellow portion, I want to just hold on to that in your mind for a moment, because it's that yellow portion, which will be a later residential phase, that we have some other ideas we want to share with you about that. Getting right into the industrial. As Daniel said, we have 8 buildings. One of the things that you'll notice in this overall landscape plan, overall site plan, is that there's a lot of green space for an industrial site. That has actually been quantified. We have over 2 acres of landscaped areas over what the code requires. And that was done really by the developer to address their own concerns about creating viewscapes from the residential and the commercial and entertainment area into the industrial. And we're going to show you some of those viewscapes. We also have, there's a prior, when we had a prior site plan for this board asked that we put in certain additional landscaping along that perimeter road, which is on between the lake, basically, the casino and the industrial. And that whole curved road has additional landscaping and layering and bigger trees per a prior approval that we had, that request was incorporated into these plans. So this is really quite unusual for an industrial parcel. It is designed, we have AAC approval, but I want to share a little bit of the design. I know that's not your bailiwick, but it helps you understand what we're trying to achieve here. We are required by the PCD to meet the mixed-use design standards for the frontage along Power Line Road. I'm sorry, Racetrack Road, all along Racetrack. And as you'll see when I show you some of those images, we have achieved that, and the AAC was very pleased with it. We've also incorporated that same level of architectural detail and design to various of the westerly corners. For example, you're going to see an image in a moment. You've got Racetrack, and then the next southerly major public road is the extension of North Palm Air Drive into the project. That goes east-west, and incorporates into the industrial. The corners there have that same kind of architectural treatment that make them look like offices instead of industrial buildings. You'll also notice in the design of these buildings, all of the truck courts have been incorporated into and basically enclosed by building, and the buildings even have returns on both sides, little corner extensions, so that the trucks will drive in, and then when you're driving into the industrial development or over to the casino, you're going to look across and you're going to see those corners. You're not going to see trucks parked. So there's really been an enormous amount of attention to design detail to create something that is incredibly aesthetically pleasing from all angles. Maybe not so much from the railroad tracks, but that's people when they're, the CXS trains can worry about that. And as I talk about that, let me mention, some of you may recall that the PCD up in the northeast corner, really between those northeasterly 2 buildings, we had indicated the potential for a tri-rail station. Now that was done 5 years ago when the original development came through, pursued that a bit with tri-rail. They were supportive at the time. As long as somebody else built it, they would operate a station if you wanted a station there. Part of the concern then was the proximity of this location to both Cypress Creek Station and Atlantic. So, right? Sample, excuse me. And they're each just about 1.5 miles from this site. Well, in the past 5 years, a lot of things have changed, and one of them is the way the city, the county, the MPO, the state of Florida are viewing mobility, and particularly mobility in this community. We know that the city has, well, through your Economic Development Council, you created a mobility task force that your vice chair is actually chairing. Thank you, Ms. Coleman. So we have been working with Earl Bosworth in the city manager's office. Corey and he have had extensive conversations. We have just starting a dialogue with the mobility task force that the better mobility option for this development, which is going to have a lot of people and a lot of people working and playing here, is to focus not so much on the west side of this site, but, I'm sorry, not so much on the east side, but on its westerly connection with Powerline. Powerline Road in the county's Primo plan, which it may have some shortcomings. I know the city is working, they're about to overcome some of those to focus better on your downtown coastal link station. But Powerline is really becoming a bus rapid transit link throughout northwest Broward County, from Pompano north. So one of the things that we have discussed with the MPO and we've discussed with your city administration is that the county could potentially have a bus rapid transit station at the intersection of North Palm Air Drive and Powerline Road. And I'm going to direct you to those yellow buildings. The yellow buildings have very large garages. Corey has been talking with Mr. Bosworth about how we can work with the city to create some kind of intermodal facility at that location, that it could be place where people from using bus rapid transit could park, or they could get off the city circulator, walk. It's going to be in these stations are supposed to be in the middle of the right-of-way, and Powerline's pretty wide. We are more than happy to do that, and hopefully we can get all that information and planning done concurrently with bringing in a site plan for that area, and we can work together to create an intermodal facility at that location. So this is the beginning of, or the continuation of, a good relationship, particularly with respect to, we really would like, as much as the city would like to connect this site with your downtown and with the beach, so would the casino operator, the live operator, Topgolf, all of these major entertainment. We want to draw the people that are going to the beach and to downtown. We want them to have an easy way to get out here. And we look forward to working with you to accomplish that. We always talk about site access, circulation, et cetera. You may recall when the PCD was passed, we had an exhibit with about 2-3 legal-sized pages of various improvements, off-site roadway improvements. Many of those are now under construction, actually in for construction permitting. They will be under construction in a matter of months, if not weeks. Powerline and Racetrack Road. The Racetrack Road improvements and access that you see here are consistent with the PCD, as well as have already been approved by Broward County Engineering, and Racetrack Road is a county road at that location. We've incorporated the right-in, the left-in, right-out components on Racetrack, which are the two easterly. We have here and here. Those are left-in, right-out for truck access, which were limitations that were requested in the PCD, and we've actually expanded on those and incorporated those in various ways. The major roadways all connect. All the pieces are fitting together. And, major connections like right there, where my cursor is, the North Palm Air Road, North Palm Air Drive with the interior circulation within the industrial. So we've tried to pull all the pieces together. This is to begin to give you a sense of the view. This is where the arrow, there's a little legend in the left-hand side, but this is the frontage meeting the mixed-use design standards on Racetrack Road and as approved by the AAC. Again, this is beginning to give you a sense of how the elements in this development are tying together with the rest of it, the site. This is more of from Racetrack Road. Again, the building is broken up, its massing is broken up tremendously. You have the truck access, again, is completely behind the buildings. You're not sharing the trucks and vehicles, so you're able to create a real image on that frontage that it looks like an office use. This is one of my favorite shots. This is, you're driving out of into, say, Topgolf or the casino garage, and looking ahead, that's what you will see. And again, you can see extensive landscaping in various locations and of various types and sizes to really give it that mature look. This is a view down that ring road, which we had discussion. You can see there the landscaping, there's a wall, there's landscaping, there's layered landscaping to separate the various uses as you get into the residential portion of the development, which would be on the west side there. This is, if you're in the future residential, looking across, again, that fence, landscaping, buffers, wide sidewalks, wall, all the things that the residential community will look across and see something pretty. This is a better view of that loop road. This is a shot that is not at a great angle, because you'll see this only if you're a drone or a bird. But we did it this way because we really wanted the elements at the south to be visible. And what's important here is at the lower end of this screen, right there, is a 20-foot wall. There's, with landscaping on both sides. This was a protection that was acquired in the PCD, and what was also contemplated was that we wouldn't be permitted to have any buildings in what is now an area, it's a lake. So we were permitted to have parking there, and prior plans actually showed some truck docks there, if you may recall. Now we're looking at a very expansive water lake and buffer areas across the way. That is the plan. That one. Again, we have our whole team here. If anyone has any questions, we'd be more than happy to answer them.
Okay, and as far as the two conditions of staff?
We're fine with all of them.
Okay. All right, questions of the applicant? Yes, Mrs. Coleman, go ahead.
I'll be glad to let somebody else go first if
You want to go first, Mr. Lewis? Okay.
the wall is between the development and basically Cypress Bend, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Let me show you that. We actually have that graphic. There you go. There's, keep pointing to the screen. Here's Cypress Bend, has a road at its north end. There's the property line, which also has existing utilities that are serving Cypress Bend, not us. Then we've got utility easement, the buffer, then you first have the wall, and then you first have landscaping and the lake.
Okay. I've been asked about that, which is why I'm asking you. Okay. This is 1.5 million square feet. Can you talk about what kind of staging you're going to do, or is it all going up at the same time?
Let me ask Scott Helms, who I don't know if you all have been around long enough when he did industrial development here in Pompano, but he's done a great deal of industrial development here, and I'll have him answer that question for you.
Hello, Scott Helms again. Can I pull up, Debbie? Pull up the
Site plan?
So the plan with the phasing is, you see buildings 3 and 4 where the entrance is. That would be phase 1. Slightly behind that are buildings 1 and 2, which we have to fill a lake. There are 2 ponds right there that we have to fill. So that could be 6 to 9 months after, once the fill is done. Then the phase 2 would be buildings 5, 6, 7, and 8. That could be split between 2 buildings each time, or it could be all done at once, depending on how the market is.
Are they all spec?
They are all spec.
Okay.
I think at this stage, we're just not at a point to.
It's too far out.
Yeah, it's too far out, but I will tell you, there's been tremendous interest with large companies to come here.
The design with the hiding the trucks is creative.
Right.
Thank you.
Right, okay.
Next?
Let me also
Oh.
add one point about the buffer to the south and the wall. Under the PCD, we are required to install those before we get the first CO for anything within the development, so within the industrial area. So that goes in, that's one of the first things in.
So it has to be done even before the first northern buildings are done?
Yeah, and the lake, that's correct.
Okay. All right. So perhaps that'll help with the buffering right away.
Question?
No. Mrs. King, go ahead.
Have you consulted with the residents in the surrounding area as to what Ms. Coleman asked about the timeframes and the traffic? That's something that I continuously hear about in that area anyways without your project. So obviously I would still be very concerned with that during this time.
Well, this project was originally approved in 2019. We did a reapproval to incorporate the industrial in 2021. We had, and that was at the height of COVID, so nobody was meeting. We did a number of Zoom meetings, and in fact, we had a webinar, call it that because I controlled who could talk when, with about 300 people. And they were our neighbors to the south at Cypress Bend, as well as to the west in Palm Air. And we worked out all the details, and as you can see, I don't think anybody's here tonight. We've had a wonderful working relationship with our neighbors over the years, and any major changes, we've communicated with them, and the only inquiries we get right now is, when can I go to Topgolf, or first it was, when's the casino gonna be, redone? And now it's, when is Topgolf, and when can we go play it live? So the answer is yes, and we've had a great relationship with them.
Corey Long with the applicant, 601 East Pratt Street, Baltimore, Maryland. I would also add that we are doing over $15 million worth of off-site improvements to support this development, which include extensive improvements on Powerline Road as well as on Racetrack Road. And up to Atlantic, yeah. So significant traffic study and very significant improvements to support the full build-out of the development, including all the residential, all the commercial, and all the industrial.
I mean, obviously I'm concerned because I know that a lot of people were in support of some of the things that we have going on in the Atlantic-Dixie Highway Corridor, and it seemed really good on paper, but when they saw we had to condense all the traffic, things looked a little bit different. So I just want to be optimistic and realistic as well as to what the traffic really would look like during that phase. Some days it's difficult to get, my business is right off Powerline in Atlantic, and some days it's difficult to get down Powerline and because of things that are going on in Atlantic. So obviously those would be things that I would be concerned about.
The majority of the $15 million worth of improvements that Corey referred to are on Powerline and include turn lanes being either created or installed, right and left turn lanes, re-signalization, new intersections. I mean, it's just been a huge undertaking, and all of that was firmed up in 2019, 2021, it was revetted, and it's been approved by both Broward County Engineering and FDOT. So as I said, we are this close to getting all the construction permits for power line, and racetrack is already permitted through the county. So you're going to be
When your
seeing a lot.
project takes off, if you see that there, I would just hope that if you see there are adjustments that need to be made, as we had to do on Atlantic and Dixie, I would just hope you would keep that in mind for the residents and the business owners in that area.
We're always open to a dialogue, but I don't think any project has been vetted for transportation improvements, and now to address mobility issues the way this one has.
Thank you.
Mrs. Smith, did you?
Thank you. I have a couple comments. When we talked about this in '21, some of the biggest concerns was the noise from the trucks. And I love, Mrs. Coleman stated already, I got so excited when I looked at your plans and I saw that the trucks were inside, because I live across power line from the development. So you guys accomplished that, and I don't think you're really going to see 18-wheelers coming and going from the property from the Cypress Bend community. They also were concerned about the sound. The buffering in the wall is perfect, and then you've added the water, which wasn't there before. And I know that they were wanting, Cypress Bend was wanting access to the property. Is there a gate in that wall for them?
No, we refused to provide any of that access. It was
Okay.
inconsistent with the whole development plan.
Okay, and that's fine. I just wondered, I knew that they were.
That went
they
off
had
the
been
table a
talking
long
about that.
time ago, Ms. Smith.
Okay. All right, well, I'm pleased to see the progress that you guys have made, and I know it's a large chunk of the land, and it wasn't what we originally were looking at, but you've done a nice job to make it aesthetically pleasing.
Thank you very much.
Anybody else? Okay. I want to go off on a little bit more in-depth stuff, a little bit. So on the two entrances that are the tractor trailer, or for lack of a better word, the two east, the entrance that's the east and then the middle one, I guess we'd call that. Those, you said they're left in and right out, which is obviously something that we are, very happy about. Are any of those signalized, or are they going to? No. So it's.
They were not required to be. Now, there may be signal warrants studies that we will have to do upon completion of the project through Broward County, but there currently are no traffic signals proposed at those locations.
And realizing that there's, the next major entrance has a traffic signal, so I understand it's the main entrance to the whole facility. But I was just curious as to whether, but if they're going to put you through warrants, then they're going to figure out whether it requires it or whatever. So I'd kind of like to jump onto something that Mrs. Smith said. This obviously has evolved. This plan evolved from when it could have potentially been office building towers and stuff. So it's made a long runway, and we understand the market's changed, and it went through the Amazon phase, if we're allowed to call it that, and then and this phase. And I think that having followed this as closely as I have through DRC, that Mr. Weems had to go to Europe for a month after I put him through all this stuff, but I really tried to follow it very closely, and I think the evolution of what we have in terms of how this fits into it is definitively better than it was in the beginning. And I think that the idea of the interior truck and being able to keep those trucks away from the back or the southern part of that property next to the lake is going to be the best you could possibly do for the people at Cypress Bend. And I know there's been a lot of concern from not just this board, but from the commissioner in that district. He has kind of worn my ear out a couple times, but for good reason. I mean, it's his constituents, and they have a very good reason for doing that. The buffering that has done, we'll start with the buffering on the south side, the 20-foot wall multiple layers of landscaping, lake, the distance that lake is in terms of how deep it is north and south, not deep as in how deep it is to dive into, but how deep it is north to south is, I think is extremely important because before it was closer, and with the trucks being, as you had mentioned, Mrs. Smith, the trucks being within the buildings, or within the southern two buildings, the truck wells being there, I think is probably as unobtrusive as, I mean, it's the train. The train's going to bother the people in Cypress Bend more than these trucks are. So I think the applicant has done a very good job with that. As you know, I had a really deep concern. I had a deep concern when we talked about the perimeter road before, and I think you probably were texting Mr. Long quickly when I said, no, 12-foot trees are not going to make it for us. And he said, no, we can do better, and you have. The multi-layering on the west side of this project, on the west side of the loop road, west side of the buildings, east side of the loop road. That is just about as good as it can get, in my mind. It's multiple layers. It starts with our layer out by the road, and then it's multiple layers of this development, meaning east of that sidewalk, and then you still have multiple tree layers, including a final layer up against the buildings, the tips of those 45-foot tall buildings. So I think that we've gotten to a pretty good place in terms of what the aesthetics of this are going to be. Its ability to keep the truck traffic where we most wanted it. So I do want to just throw a little bit of discussion back, continued discussion on the transportation. And transportation, as Mrs. Coleman well knows, now that we've made her go be the leader and head cheerleader and drum beater of transportation for the next time frame that we need to deal with in this city. So we at one time, as you had mentioned, had talked about transportation on the train, but I believe myself, I believe that the other modes of transportation at this point are going to become more important. For integration into our entire city, how, as you mentioned, you know, the transportation modeling of going from this far point past the downtown and innovation district and then to the beach redevelopment that we have created over the last 15 years or so. So I think that in my mind, even though initially I was kind of skeptical about not getting a train station potentially, I think that the other modes and the commitment, and so I'm going to kind of I guess I'll put Mr. Long on the spot, and I want to know, I realize that is a much later, it's going to be a later phase, potentially. So I want to know, like, when we say it's a commitment, we talk about buildings potentially being raised or whatever. What kind of commitment can we make in terms of, like, I'm not sure you can commit to a time frame because obviously development is staged, but what kind of commitment as to what you potentially see? Is this going to be under a tiny little building? Is it going to be in a 1-acre place, a 2-acre potentially? If we could have some idea of that, because that for me is like the only thing that's up in the air as far as.
So this is to be separate and apart from the action you'll take this evening. We're going to be back in front of this board when the yellow buildings come in. And
Right.
I put the cursor on a parking garage.
Okay.
That garage, and let me just give you, we're all very early in this discussion.
Right.
And our only hope is that you all move along fast enough on your mobility planning together with the county that when we're ready to bring in that site plan, you got the ask ready. But here's the kinds of things we've been thinking about when we talk about what we could do to create a multimodal. Let me first start by saying the Primo plan at the county is showing, is hoping to have, this is, I guess, according to the MPO, I'm not sure if the county agrees with this yet, to put these bus rapid transit stations in the middle of the right-of-way. It's almost like a European city where you have it. It's a much better way to access it for the transit. There would be a crosswalk to, for example, I'm kind of spitballing this, right?
I understand.
There would be a crosswalk, keeping in mind that we are currently expanding the intersection on both sides of Powerline and North Palmer Drive. It's being a full intersection, new turn lanes, new signalization, so it could incorporate a pedestrian crossing signal if it needed to at a later date. That's not a problem.
Okay.
And then you would think, let's say, for example, if someone living in Palmer wanted to go to bus rapid transit, but it's a long walk from where they live in Palmer to this, they could come, they could park in public parking on the ground level of that garage. They could leave their car there, get on bus rapid transit. If they came from any part of the city and they wanted to do that. Let's say it was someone who was fortunate enough to live in proximity to where your circulator goes. They could potentially ride the circulator to this location, get off within, and when we talk about a higher level, the normal ceiling heights on a ground level of parking garage would not accommodate a minibus or a bus. We are prepared to give that greater height so that if a larger vehicle needed to get in, it would not only be able to have clearance height-wise, but it would have a location where it could safely pick up and drop off people. Those are the kinds of things we're thinking about.
Okay.
We think they're consistent with the direction of the Primo plan. We're hoping what the city may come up with would come to some of those. I introduced Ms. Coleman to Corey just earlier this evening. He's already been meeting with Earl Bosworth, who's also on the task force, and we just need to get some good minds together, and we're all committed to creating this level of mobility between your centers throughout the city, and we want to be one of those centers. We want that connectivity.
Good.
Corey, you want to add?
It's going to take a group effort, we all know that, to really study things. To point, we think it's along Palmer between Powerline and the live core of the development. But as Debbie said, we're committed to creating a facility that allows a higher height vehicle to come into, whether it's a shuttle bus, and again, we need to talk through what those might be. I don't think Broward County Transit is going to turn into our development, but the circuit system, those things may evolve, that you do have larger vehicles other than the more golf cart size that we want to accommodate. So that's important. We would also look to create some waiting area of feasibility. That's a conditioned waiting area, so we're not creating a place where people have to stand along the side of the street, but they can sit down in a conditioned space before they get on their transit mode, whatever it might be. Bike racks, all of that stuff to facilitate the multimodal transportation. So absolutely ready and willing. We've been reaching out the way we have because, as you know, Topgolf is looking to open this December, we think, right now, the track that it's on. The casino's done massive improvements inside and outside, and we want to be ready for people to be able to go east-west in this town to enjoy what we all think is the best beach in Broward County, and then come out to our development. So it's very important to us, and we're ready to be at the table and to really help lead the effort.
Okay. So just a general, I realize this is really, really general. The time frame, realizing that you're going to probably do some, I guess these are pink, I don't know what color they are, my eyesight's not that good, but you're going to do some of the residential along the that's south of this after you do the tower. I guess the next thing is your place that's along the edge of the lake there or something?
Yes, that mid-rise residential that you see, yes, right there.
Okay,
We intend that to be that should be in to DRC within the next month for pre-app.
okay, so this board will probably see it maybe the end of this year or something?
Before the end of the year would be our goal to
What's
be
your
in front
goal?
of P&Z.
Okay. And then potentially the residential along the south end is prior to the yellow?
It has been looked at that way. I can tell you from a philosophical standpoint, we are placemakers as developers. We're not building this and then looking to get out and move on. So we're placemakers. The reason we're doing that mid-rise building, which in this market today, even though the residential market is doing pretty well in South Florida, it's not the highest sought-after product for this site and the location. But we think it's important to make the place at that density. So it's feasible that those yellow spaces within, call it 3 to 4 years, would be on the docket for planning. I do think it's important for us to have the discussions about transit. Eventually, we need to focus on parking as well. So not just building out the residential on that side, but also facilitating parking for the commercial district. So as the commercial districts grow, as residential grows, we may want to look just to facilitate structured parking sooner than later, which by nature would lead into the transit discussion.
Gotcha. Okay. Great. Anybody else?
I have a question.
Yes, Mrs. Kovac, go ahead.
How unusual is a 20-foot tall wall? I don't think I've ever heard of it. And how
Just on
long
the
is that
highways.
wall?
Well, it was a requirement when the PCD rezoning was put in place. It's a fairly unusual. Think of the sound walls along I-95 next to residential.
Imagine it. Just can't imagine a wall that tall.
Well, but adjacent to it is now a lake and then industrial, and to the south of it are 6- and 8-story buildings. So they probably won't even see the wall, candidly. There's so much landscaping.
Are you going to soften it with landscaping or
Big time.
a lot of landscaping? Okay.
Yeah, on both sides of it.
sides.
There you go.
Doesn't look like enough.
You're required to put that
How
in
can you
under
get
the
landscaping?
PCD zoning.
Okay.
So we're not required to put in as much landscaping, but there we go again, loving those trees. Sarah's been in heaven.
Okay.
I know it's necessary in that, but, okay.
Anybody else?
No.
Anybody in the audience want to speak on this item? Okay, seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. Any last-minute questions? And if not, the chair will entertain a motion on item number 8.
Chair, I'd like to make a motion that the board finds competent, substantial evidence has been presented for the major site plan for a live industrial parcel that satisfies the review criteria and move approval of the item subject to the, was it 2 conditions?
2 conditions.
2 conditions provided by staff.
Second.
Okay, we have a second, excuse me, we have a motion and a second. Any questions on the motion? If not, call the roll on item number 8.
Darlene Smith,
Yes.
Arlo Coleman,
Yes.
Tundra King,
Yes.
Richard Klosowitz,
Yes.
Joan Kovac,
Yes.
Derek Lewis,
Yes.
Fred Stacer.
Yes, good luck. Thank you. All right. Yeah, it's pretty clever, wasn't it? Yeah, you're never gonna see those tractor trailers from there. Yeah. And the, you know, having a wall along the side when they drive down there, you're not gonna see into those truck walls and stuff. So, yeah. Okay, next item is item number 9, McNabb Hotel Text Amendment. This is citywide, so the project location is 872 East McNabb Road, but the text amendment would actually apply throughout all the B2 districts. Mr. Keystro Mills. you're
That
up.
is correct. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Daniel Keystro Mills, Principal Planner with Development Services. The item for you is a public initiated text amendment. And yes, the address originally initiated at 872 East McNabb Road, but the request would be applicable citywide. So, again, this is generally where the request initiated off of McNabb. There was a application that went before the Zoning Board of Appeals for a special exception to allow a hotel in a property that's zoned B2. The Zoning Board of Appeals did not find that the applicant met all the competent substantial evidence necessary to grant the special exception, and the applicant is now seeking a public initiated text amendment that would apply citywide. So the map on the screen right now is generally identifying all those areas that would be affected if the Planning and Zoning Board and City Commission ultimately approved this application. These are all the areas where B2 zoning are. They're generally throughout the city. Against kind of originally with the Euclidean zoning and the transitional zoning, the B2 sandwiched between B1 and B3 up against residential and commercial alike. So the general text amendment is pretty straightforward, requesting to strike through the special exception use in B2 and allow it to be permitted by right. The review standards have been included with the staff report, and for the board's consideration is on the PowerPoint right now. There are 7 standards that the applicant has addressed in their narrative. And given the information provided by the board, or to the board, as the finder of fact, the Development Services Department provides the following alternative motions and options which may be revised or modified at the board's discretion. Alternative motion number 1 is to recommend approval of the text amendment to the City Commission for their consideration, or alternative motion number 2, to table this application for additional information requested by staff. Staff recommends alternative motion number 1. I'm here for any questions that you might have, and the applicant also has a presentation.
Sure.
I'll hold my question. I have a number of questions, but I'll hold them until after the applicant's made his presentation, Mr. Chair.
Anybody have any questions of staff before we move to the applicant? Okay, seeing none.
I'll be here.
Okay, applicant.
Rahil Sanghavi, 872 East McNabb Road. I have been sworn in. Good evening, everybody. So I just want to give the reasoning for, my reasoning for initiating this the text amendment was the fact that a condo hotel is a use by right that is approved in the B2 district. And I'm not going to bore you guys with the definition, but I've highlighted in red a condo hotel, essentially a building that contains individual lodging units which may be occupied by limited bases by lodging unit owner whose primary purpose is a visitor accommodation use. So this is in the in section 155.4225, and the next is a hotel, which was a special exception, and it's a building or group of buildings with sleeping accommodations that are offered to the public and intended primarily for rental or temporary occupancy by persons on an overnight basis. So there are definitely parallels between what's approved by right versus what is a special exception, and the underlying intent between both definitions is intended for visitor use. And approving the text amendment would be consistent with the comprehensive plan, section 1.3.10, to support and promote hotels and motels and other tourist accommodations in designated residential, commercial, and commercially recreational land use designations. And that's my presentation. Thank you.
Okay. Mrs. Coleman, go ahead.
I don't think that you do meet the text amendment review standards here. I don't think you meet, I don't think that this, not you, I don't think this text amendment meets those standards of is required by changing conditions, or addresses a demonstrated community need, or is consistent with the purpose or intent of the zoning codes. A condo hotel is slightly different than a hotel, and all of the areas on this map, to me, that are B2 are primarily residential neighborhoods. And if we think we had a problem with Briney Avenue having a hotel plopped in there, as we saw our last meeting, a hotel by right in a B2, I think is not really what we want to do. I understand a condo hotel is allowed there, but there are ownership units there. It's not a hotel that attracts the kind of volume of business, because there are owner uses there sometimes, that I think just a regular hotel on McNabb Road would. I mean, you're not looking at putting this next to an attraction of any sort, or a gateway to the beach, or a gateway to other things. I just think that it is the right call to have this as a special exception, if there is a place that it is allowed. But our zoning board of appeals looked at it last time and said, nope, doesn't meet our standards either. And this is the second time in 2 months we have had someone be turned down at the zoning board of appeals and then come to us for a text change on our zoning codes. And so I'm just not ready to support it, because I don't think it meets the review standards for a text amendment.
So I have a couple questions.
Yeah, Mr. Lewis, go ahead.
So did you present the same evidence here that you presented to the Zoning Board of Appeals in terms of the PowerPoint presentation?
The Zoning Board of Appeals was much more in-depth with, because they had, the public had comments about traffic and things like that. There was a traffic study that was included, and essentially it was the same.
Okay, and in what they, I guess what the public had some comments about as far as the traffic study, can you tell us a little bit about what those issues were?
So due to the location of the hotel at that point in time, it was McNabb Road, and they said that the hotel use would increase trips on McNabb Road. But there are, so one other thing that I did not add in this PowerPoint is there are other, so let's just talk about the traffic issue. So we had a traffic study done, and I do have the results for that traffic study that I didn't include here, but there are other uses that create many more trips by right than a hotel would, like a convenience store, gas stations, banks. Those are all uses by right. So and a hotel on the other end does not create as many trips, is because in the peak hour the hotels work the other ways, because checkout at the peak hours is defined between 7 a.m. and 9 a.m., but a hotel checkout time is 11 a.m. or noon. So those trips are eliminated on peak hours, and then the check-in time for a hotel is 3 or 4 p.m., but like guests usually don't check in till night, like 8 or 9 p.m. So those trips are much more, it's less than what other uses by right would be. So that was the whole premise of the traffic. The land is vacant right now, so it does not generate any trips. So anything that does get built on the land, it could be a hotel, gas station, bank, whatever it could be, it is going to generate some trips. And it is my opinion and my engineer's opinion that hotels, out of all the uses, that it generates on the lower end.
So there's an elementary school that's just adjacent to this property, and I just know because I live in the area, and the traffic caused by that both in the morning and afternoon backs McNabb Road all the way up to the next major intersections, actually all the way out to Federal, including where the public shopping center is. And so I imagine that the traffic study you did show that this would, increase the amount of traffic in that area at those times by quite a lot.
Well, the thing is, the elementary school traffic is only in the peak hours between 7 to 9 when the drop-off. So we are only generating, I think, 28 trips during the peak hour in the morning. I think I have it written down.
Mr. Chair, if I may, in all due respect to Member Lewis, a lot of the questions that are being presented right now are questions that were really under the jurisdiction of the Zoning Board of Appeals, which were items which they used pursuant to their review standards to determine whether or not the particular applicant's desire met those special exceptions. So I caution you on asking those kinds of questions that were pursuant to that review. As it was mentioned by staff and the chair initially, what you're looking at here is a citywide text amendment that would apply to any hotel, being in a, not this specific one, but any hotel in a B2 being permitted by right to be in that location versus what our current code calls for, and that is by special exception, meaning does it meet the sort of questions that you're asking now? Does it fit? Does it cause noise? Is there traffic? Those are things that were pursuant, or questions that you would ask pursuant to a special exception. And the applicants come to you tonight basically say any hotel, not just his, but any hotel, whether or not it could be placed in a B2 zoning district. Just want to keep you on those review standards that are before you tonight. Thank you.
Okay. Did you want to?
Well, I have more of it. If anyone has any questions, I can.
I'm sorry?
No, that's fine.
Oh, okay.
It's for staff,
Yeah.
Daniel, B2 is basically community business, is it not?
Yes.
And a bank, a dry cleaners, a convenience store, while they may generate more trips, they are community businesses meant to be near a residential area, correct?
Community serving, yeah, public services.
Right. Open to the public, but community services. And I, again, just think that a hotel, by right, I don't think fits in that category. And so it doesn't meet the review standards for the text amendment. And you guys recommended this. Is there something I'm missing here? Is there another criteria that you used, other thinking that you used to recommend approval?
Just pulling up the review standards again. So we didn't, there are on-plan policies that support it in this land use category. The land use category being much more broad. And so I think the zoning districts and the zoning codes allow for this type of discretion and distinction between the land use categories. So the land use category, that land use policy that the applicant presented, encouraging hotels and motels in residential and commercial land use categories, and then I think that our zoning code is aligned with that. The applicant is merely requesting to further that zoning standard as opposed to the special exception use, which is currently allowed in the zoning district or zoning code, and allowing for another body, the Zoning Board of Appeals, to make those further discretionary choices on a different set of review standards for this zoning district. So I think that the text as it is currently is consistent with the comp plan, and I think that an argument could be made to allow it in that B2 standard in B2 zoning district. So they see it would be inconsistent with the comp plan. However, when you're looking at it more closely and analyzing the map, and that's, I think, a choice that the Planning and Zoning Board and City Commission could make either argument way. And so staff doesn't find, in going through the review standards, it could be, but it's the position of the Planning and Zoning Board and City Commission to make that assessment on if it is a change in condition from, and change that zoning code to the permitted use as opposed to the special exception use. So that's why our recommendation is that it could be permitted, and there are comp plan policies to support hotels, but if the conditions haven't changed and the special exception is still, the the preferred method of implementation for the hotel. And I think that's where.
Only in
Be-
B2, only in B2. We allow them in B3, we allow them in other places.
I have a question of staff also.
Okay.
I just want to point out that hotel is a permitted use in residential.
Dolan.
Not only that, oh, sorry, Gene Dolan, Development Services. Not only that, we allow hotels to have gross density, double the density to their gross, which the only other use that can get gross density is if you rezone to PD. So hotels are considered compatible with residential. They're encouraged in residential to the point that we give them extra density than anybody else. So it is a use that's considered compatible with residential, and it is neighborhood serving. When people come visit you, they can stay in a hotel nearby. So I do think the code is internally inconsistent in terms of saying in B2, which is neighborhood serving uses, we don't allow uses that we allow in the residential. I mean, if it could just go right next door to the B2 and be approved with double the
Wait a minute.
density.
Yes, I understand.
You're telling me that this would be allowed in a R1, R2 zoning district?
No, not in R1 and 2, but in a multifamily district, you'd only get a 2-unit hotel, so obviously you wouldn't put it in R1. But
Right.
if you're putting it in RM12 and RM20 and RM45, you can get double the density to the gross.
I understand that. I understand that, but I don't think that we're talking about a 24-room hotel here. I think that we're talking about something that is a little bit more dense. So I've said my piece. Thank you.
Okay, I have a question of
Go
staff.
back, go ahead.
Condo hotels can have restaurants, right? And they can have coffee shops, right? And they do. I know of condo hotels that have coffee shops and so I'm having problems seeing what the great difference is between a hotel and a condo hotel. Most of the big hotels along the beach now have a great portion of their hotel is condo hotels. That gives them an established sort of revenue. I think size makes a difference if it's a 10-story building or not, but I can't see much actual difference between a condo hotel and a regular hotel in most of the those I think about. We have a hotel right on Federal Highway that's right next to residential. Doesn't seem to be a problem there. So those are my comments.
At the end of my street, my island. One of the other things you brought up, Mrs. Kovac, is that about height, too. B2 and B3 have the same height. They're both 105, where B1 is restricted to, I believe, 50 feet. Is that 45 feet? Okay. So the only restricted height, I mean, B2, B3, and B4 all have 105 height limitations. I honestly don't, what are the other differences between B2 and B3? I don't really see, there's a big difference in my mind between B3 and B4 because B4 leans towards industrial, so it allows heavier uses and stuff like that. And B1 is very specifically to me is, hey, these are the smaller community on the edge of the residential type. You know, it can't be over 45 feet if that's the right number. I was thinking it was 50, but the point is it's not nearly as physically intense. A building can be just as physically intense in B2 as it is in B3. So what differences are there in the code that are so, I just don't see such a huge difference between B2 and B3 personally. Please, I'm sorry.
Between B2 and B3, the B3 opens up a lot of different commercial uses. Obviously, this isn't an application or a rezoning application, but the B3 opens up a lot of different commercial ventures, commercial type businesses that aren't permitted in B2. And also between the
Can you talk into the microphone? I can't hear you.
Oh, I'm sorry. Is this better?
Yeah.
Yes.
I apologize. So B3 opens up a lot of different commercial uses that are not permitted in B2. To Ms. Coleman's point, the B2 and B1 are more personal services type uses, whereas B3 opens up a lot of more commercial, offices and other.
You can't put an office building in B2?
You can put an office.
And it would be the same height as an office building in B3?
I think that the zoning standards between B2 and B3 are different. I can pull them up. I don't have them memorized, but
The height?
I do believe
The
that.
height is 105 feet.
Both of those
I looked it up,
Okay.
yeah. I looked it up. That's why I don't understand how, I mean, unless, I do see a definitive difference in the way we use B2 and B3. B3 and B4. B4 leans into getting to the edge of industrial, and some of those uses are more noxious. I don't think that the uses are that different between B2 and B3. I can see the ones in B1 because if you restrict the height, you're not going to have not as likely to have, the intensity that you would with a building that's twice as tall, no matter what the use is. And personally, I live at the end of the street that we were talking about. I live on that same island, and there's I've probably literally gone past that hotel, I assume you're talking about the Hampton Inn on Federal.
Right.
I've literally probably gone past that hotel 10,000 times since it's built. It's on the end of my island. I pass it twice if I leave my house and go home. So if I go out of my house 5 times during the day, I went by it 10 times. I can tell you in the thousands of times I've been by there, I've never in one light cycle seen more than 3 cars come out of basically a 8-story, 190 unit or whatever the hotel is. I have people on those islands that said, I can't believe you allowed it. Well, it's the use and it's allowed. And quite honestly, 3 cars at any one light cycle, that is not adding cars. I mean, God bless the school board, but I wish they would take care of the problem on McNabb Road. But I wouldn't blame potential business owners on McNabb Road because the school board's situation. I wish they would buy the land between McNabb School and that church and let everybody park there like we stuff those people, those mothers, my marauding band of Catholic mothers at St. Coleman's, we stick them in the parking lot and don't let them drive out on Federal Highway, which is pretty noxious, and at times they've done it, but I don't see this as being a problem with this particular use, and quite honestly, I went and looked at every single B2 property on that zoning to see what was next to it. The shopping center at the southwest corner of Powerline and Atlantic, okay? That's in a B2. Across the street in a B3 is the Walmart, which is now a PD of some type. But I don't see, there's 2 of them on, I'm not even sure what road this is, but I think it's Cypress Road. There's 2 B2s, they're next to B4, and B4 is definitively more noxious than B3. There's some that are next to other B3s. If you're next to B3, potentially, I guess you could have a buffering somehow in between a B3 and a B2 and maybe some residential, but I don't see those huge differences in the use. I mean, and I don't think hotels are actually that noxious personally in the commercial. But anyway, you were going to tell me before I started talking.
I agree.
Are you going to, I'm sorry?
I agree.
Oh, were you going to tell me about what the differences and
Maybe
uses were or not? Or just in general, you just said what you said?
I drove
Okay.
down there too. It's
Okay. I didn't see the uses. I mean, I scanned through the use table to see if I thought, oh, there's a lot more noxious uses in B3. And honestly, my conclusion was more of, I'm not even sure why we got B2. It should be either B1 or B3. And, I just don't see it as being that different personally, but, that's just my own opinion. So anyway, anybody else? Anybody in the audience want to speak on this? Are we done with
Nobody
discussion?
left.
Okay, so we'll close the public hearing, and would you like to make a close?
Coleman. Do you want me to address the difference between a regular hotel and a condo hotel? Like,
No, I'm well aware of what they are.
okay.
Thank you. But I appreciate that.
They're not too different, that's the reason.
They're not too different. My issue is, I just don't, we've got differences of opinion on the board. That's why we're all individuals.
Right.
And I appreciate it. It's going to be up to the other board members to decide which way they want to go on this.
Absolutely.
It's, and I wish you luck. I just think it's the wrong place, but that's my opinion.
Okay, anybody else? All right, so I think I've closed the public hearing, right? Yeah, okay, so we're back at the board. And if there is no other discussion, then the chair will entertain a motion on item 9.
I'll make a motion.
Mrs. Kovac.
I move that we recommend approval of the text amendment.
Second.
Do we need more than that? Okay.
No, it's just motion number 1, yeah. Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any questions on the motion? Call the roll on item number 9, please.
Joan Kovac,
Yes.
Richard Klotzowitz,
Yes.
Tundra King,
Yes.
Derek Lewis,
No.
Darlene Smith,
Yes.
Carla Coleman,
No.
Fred Stacer.
Yes. Okay, thank you very much.
Mr. Chair, just as a point of clarification to staff, only because there were comments made about other regulations that may be imposed as a result of this being done by right. I'm not sure if there is anything in the code that would address the buffering, buffering, because I didn't hear anybody say anything about the height or any other requirements that come along with this type of use.
The zoning code design standards includes a section about residential compatibility. So if a commercial use were abutting a single-family zoning district or a single-family home, then that's when those residential design standards would go in, which is a little more strict about certain placement of vehicle uses, parking lots, setbacks. So those are some things that might be impacted that is not specifically addressed in this code amendment, if that answers your question, Council.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure maybe as we're going through that, there may be a sentence or two we may need to add just to connect that. That's all I was going to suggest.
I'm not, yeah,
We'll see.
okay. All right, that being said, we are move on to the next item. It's audience to be heard. We have no audience to be heard tonight. Do we have any staff reports?
No, sir.
No staff reports down there? No? Mr. Klotzowitz, what do you have for us? Anything?
Well done today. Thank you.
A little quicker, huh? Hold on for August. We might have a load again. Mrs. Kovac, go ahead, please.
I just want to comment that I'm really impressed with the way our beach area is developing, and it certainly attracts people there. Every new restaurant pulls a bunch of people in. I think they've done a wonderful job.
Good. Mrs. Coleman.
Did you
You've got
want me
a-
to talk
please.
just briefly
Yeah,
about
could
the
you give us a
multimodal
report
task
on?
force?
Yes, ma'am.
The multimodal task force, which I talked about a little bit last month, has had its first 2 meetings, and we've got 2 more to go. But we're pulling together a fairly impressive list of issues to address on better integration and compatibility between transportation and of all kinds, from walking, biking, cars, heavy trucks, marine, public transportation, and we will be meeting at our next meeting on August 9th with the city traffic consultants, Kimley Horn. The city's putting together a scope of services to do a transportation master plan for Pompano, and our recommendations will feed into that scope. For instance, we want to make sure that their study is very forward-thinking. It's got a near-term and a far-term horizon on it, and that we can point to that transportation plan and the integration in the kinds of things that we're doing here and we're seeing every day. But I think a lot of people would be surprised to find out that Pompano doesn't have a transportation master plan. And there probably also will be a recommendation that some sort of transportation advisory committee is formed at the other end. But we're trying to keep this at 30,000 feet, and it's very hard to do and not get into the weeds. The task force, which only has 4 meetings, will not be solving issues, but it will be making recommendations on how to solve issues. It'll be much like the 31st Avenue Task Force that Ms. Smith served on. So we hope to be half as successful as you were. That's that report. I also, Daniel, I know that you had a conversation with one of the commissioners about the bike. I think that she's under the impression that in our code, we limit bike racks to 20 per any parking area. And I pulled that, and it's not that we limit them, but that we don't cap them, but they are tied to the number of spaces. But they can provide more if they choose to.
Absolutely. The limit is that the zoning code doesn't require any more than 20 parking spaces. The applicant can absolutely provide more than that, and there's no limitation on what the applicant or what a property owner could provide. The limit is just what our requirements are.
Okay, I think the wording is just so kind of backwards. The first time I read it, I thought it was capping it as well.
Okay.
Then I went back and read it again. Perhaps you can reach back to the commissioner and have another conversation and make sure she knows that it's not a cap.
I don't remember which commissioner, but
I'll get with you.
I think
Yeah. I'm going to just add on to that for just a second, because I had a conversation after post our last development, or Mr. Adachi's last development, and they're so committed to it that they actually are going to, in this next apartment building, have a, for lack of a better word, almost like a self-service biking shop, so to speak, where you can go in and change your own tire if you know how to change your tires, and they'll have power pumps and whatever it is for bikers, and which I think is really a great thing from downtown. I mean, I think it could be really, that's a very progressive thing, but it wasn't my turn. Mrs. Smith, it's your turn. So.
Did you see, Mrs. Coleman, did you see in the Pompano Beach newsletter about the Broward County Multimodal Task Force?
Yes, we did see that. We did talk about it and pulled out the biker walker survey and distributed it. They're doing a biker walker survey, and we may absolutely include a recommendation that something similar to that be conducted by our transportation consultants here. There is huge interest in biking in this community, but no safe way to do it. And that ranges everything from school children and pathways for school children to get from their homes to their schools to just, really serious bikers. And that is going to be a huge issue and a huge piece of this. But not just that. I mean, multimodal of all kinds. But the biking is really what is driving part of this right now, because we heard that you cannot get from here to there, almost any place in the city, on a bike. And we need to do better.
I applied for the Broward County one because I chair Lakes, Trails, and Green Spaces of Palmyra, And Broward County Greenway, which goes from the Everglades to Pompano's Beach, is in the middle of that. So I would love to incorporate Palm Air into Broward County Greenways. So I'm hoping that I'll get selected for that task force, so I'll let you know.
Good.
But thank you, that committee is so needed in Pompano Beach. Thanks for doing that.
It's good to have a competent chairman, I mean, not here, but on that board, you know. But anyway,
Well, I don't know about that, but I've sure got some good committee members.
there you go. That's, yeah. I have good committee members too. It doesn't necessarily help, though. Okay, did you have anything else, or are you done? Okay, Mrs. King, are you?
Yes, I just wanted to talk a little bit on the budgeting meeting that I attended.
Great.
I think it was last Tuesday. The first concern, obviously, that I had, that it was 10 o'clock in the morning, and I just think that's a very difficult time for people to actually come out and attend the meeting. I know they said it was, well advertised, but obviously not. There was only 2 people there that was from the community. So I implored the commissioners to perhaps look at a time change for that, and perhaps do it in the evening where people are able to come once they get off work. The other thing that several commissioners brought up was the time frame of actually having the meeting that was last Tuesday. Perhaps that could have been scheduled a few months in, so that they get a chance to review it, as well as get it out to their constituents to see if there's things that they'd like to see, on the budget, or changes, and that some of the commissioners, had some concerns that some of the items that they had on the budget had been on there for a few years, and some of those projects still had not been carried out. I thought that Tammy did an excellent job trying to keep everybody in sync and explaining what every project was and what it cost and what's required. So we're coming up on September for, I guess, the budget to be approved by the community, for them to have an opportunity to hear everything. But again, the time frame is kind of rushed. Commissioner Fournier obviously brought up that she felt it would be important for us to maybe definitely revisit having an opportunity way before last Tuesday to perhaps review the budget, maybe even a few times a year, to see how much we're on task, or if there are adjustments that need to be made before this meeting that we had on last week, which is going to be so close to coming up for approval in September, when the commission doesn't meet next month. So by the time they meet again, we're right on top of everything for the budget, and it's just not a lot of time or wiggle room for the commissioners, as some of them express, as well as getting that information out to their constituents. By the time we come back, it's time for a commission meeting, and it's time for us to vote on the budget. So those are just some of the things that were brought out, but I definitely like to see it change to sometime in the afternoon, so that more people are able to come to see where our dollars are being spent.
Just curious, did they, was there, this is a very, very hot subject, shall we say. Was there any discussion, or did anybody bring up anything about a budget committee? Outside budget, I mean, meaning citizens?
Now, I think the last 2.5 hours, I was not there. I had to leave for another meeting. So if it was brought up, it was brought up during that time. So I don't want to say no, because I did miss a couple hours of the meeting. So if someone brought it up, they may have brought it up during that time, but not while I was present. I didn't hear about that.
Understand. No, I was just curious. Some time ago, I was on that committee, and I got to say, it got pretty adversarial at times, so I'm not sure it's necessarily going to be the most productive thing, but I was just curious.
I would support that.
Yeah.
I would definitely support that. But like I said, I didn't hear that, unless it happened after I left.
Yeah. Mr. Lewis?
Thank you.
Do you have something?
I'm glad we're focusing on transportation in the city. That kind of connects us. And also that the city's working very well, even within these projects. I'm looking at like the ingress, egress of these trucks, because what I do on a day-to-day basis, I see a lot of safety-related issues, and it's nice to see a focus on that, because while we make things look nice, we also need to make things safe. So I've been enjoying seeing that.
Okay. Yeah, that's interesting. I've done for almost probably 3 decades, I've done consulting work for the Department of Transportation on eminent domain projects, and it's If you want to get FDOT's attention, just say safety and see what happens. Everybody starts scattering, it's like, oh my God, they brought up the S word, it's horrible, don't do that. They all get nervous and everybody's like, Jesus, don't say safety, please. Okay, I won't say it again, I'm sorry, Anyway, so I don't really, believe it or not, I don't have a lot to talk about, so I talked a lot tonight. So anyway, I think, the one thing I did want to say is I think after 6 months, I think we've also set a 6-month record this year on construction volume. So we're still plugging along. And I saw your DRC schedule. It's, everybody strap in. We're gonna have a second half of the year. It's gonna be interesting too. So, and that's all I have. If everybody's good.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Mr. Clausewitz, sir.
On behalf of the staff and all the board members, I move we adjourn.
Okay, so moved. All right.